After the frustrating 2024 SBC annual meeting, many conservatives in the SBC are pondering whether or not they should leave the SBC altogether. On this episode of Forge and Anvil, I will be joined by former SBC presidential candidate Jared Moore to discuss these very questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Welcome to Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out uncomfortable conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual war that we are living in. My name is Connor. I am host of this podcast. I am a husband, a father, and a follower of Christ Jesus, just doing my best to represent him well everywhere I go. As I mentioned in the opening, I'm joined by Dr. Jared Moore, who ran for president of the SBC. So, Jared, go ahead and introduce yourself to those who are not yet familiar.
Yeah, I'm Jared Moore. I've been in the SBC 24 years in pastoral ministry. Was saved in a Southern Baptist church. Attended seminary at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. I love the SBC, man. Love the Southern Baptist and our evangelistic zeal, our desire to be obedient to the Lord, our stand upon the Word, And I'd hope to have more, serve Southern Baptist as SBC president, but that did not come to fruition. So I'll keep serving in other capacities. But so that's who I am.
Well, we're glad to have you on again, Jared, and we'll talk a lot about your race and kind of recap some of that. Before we get straight into it, though, for you listening, feel free to share this far and wide. We really appreciate it. We are live on YouTube, Rumble, and X, so feel free to repost the stream as well and tag people, and we really appreciate that. It does help get this out there, and we do appreciate that. And, of course, you can go over to our Substack, forgeandanvil.substack.com. That's where I put all of the episodes of the show and occasional extra content for all of you. Some of which is free, and you can put in your email and get it sent to you. And then there's also an option where you can throw a tip in the jar, and we appreciate that as well. So yeah, Jared, we'll go ahead and dive straight in. So, I had Joshua Abatoy on last Monday, kind of giving a recap of what happened in the SBC. So we won't go over everything because by now most people who are interested probably already know. But if not, for you listeners, you don't even have to go to another podcast. You can jump straight over to last week's episode with Joshua Abatoy and get the entire recap of the SBC, kind of what happened beginning to end. But we didn't focus too much on your presidential race. So, Jared, maybe just go ahead and let us know kind of how you feel after running. Just kind of let the audience know a little bit about how you're doing after all that craziness.
Oh, I'm doing great. I mean, I would have liked to have won, but I mean, I'll do my best to still serve Southern Baptist. I mean, that's really what it's about is, serving Southern Baptists. And if Southern Baptists don't want me to be SBC president, then I won't serve them in that way. I'll still continue to write and, try to encourage. And as far as I think this year was unique because you actually had candidates converse with each other. I mean, there's more information this year than probably any year since the conservative resurgence as far as what particular candidates believed on particular subjects. The information was out there and people could have, I probably did between 8 and 10 interviews, and then I did 3 interviews with the other candidates, kind of forums. And then I spoke at the Center for Baptist Leadership as well. So, I mean, the information was out there. And I think that in previous years, you've had a lot of candidates where they basically don't answer any questions unless there's an event at the convention. And even then, it's kind of softball questions, but this year wasn't like that. And so I think it was good. And I hope I hope this is how it goes from now on, where we actually know who we're voting for. Like we know what they're going to do, what they stand for. That I think that is a good thing. And I kept having people, here and there, probably once a week, folks would tweet me and say, we don't want the SBC becoming like the Republican Democrat debate and the election for United States president and stuff. And I don't think that's we're just trying to get information out there so folks know what we believe instead of just you know basing it on a 2 minute or 3 minute nomination speech who you're going to vote for is I mean I don't think that's a good stewardship
Right.
of what the SBC president does. Um, so I think we should be well informed, and this year folks had the opportunity to be more informed than in decades. So I would do it again. I mean, I have no plans to do it again. But I would, if I had to do it over, even knowing that I would lose, I still would do it
Mm.
because I think it helped get more information out there of by me saying what I believe and what I'm going to do. I think it encouraged the other men to do the same. So I
Yeah.
thought it was good.
Yeah. If nothing else, I agree with you. It's not anything like presidential politics in the popular American sense. There's definitely a lot more respect, I think, between the candidates. Now, I wouldn't have said there was any gross mudslinging or anything like that. There was definitely debate, and some of it was heated at times, but it was nothing like you see between a Trump Joe Biden on CNN or anything like that. So I
Right.
think I think we're a long ways off from that as of right now. So we'll pray that continues. But I tend to agree with you. There's definitely some victories from the convention. Now, this is my first convention, of course, but I think I'm among size of people that we could call I guess freshman SBC goers. And I think that's the real victory here is folks like the Center for Baptist Leadership, American Reformer, Founders Ministries, a lot of these guys that have been pushing the SBC for more transparency and better communication. I think that they can honestly say that they impacted this year in that area, especially. So, even though we did not get a Jared Moore presidency and quite a few other things like the law amendment did not pass and some of these big things that were heavy losses, I think that the whole thing was not all a wash. And I'm hoping that this is laying the groundwork for great conservative resurgence in the future. But that brings us to our topic for tonight. So, Jared, I know that you are no stranger to SBC politics, and you have seen people talking online about leaving the SBC. So, the question of the evening: should Christian conservatives consider leaving the SBC, and if so, why? Why or why not?
Yeah, don't leave the SBC. It makes no sense logically to leave the SBC. The SBC is not forcing your church to do anything. You can literally teach everything that you've taught up to this point. The convention didn't change that. So I would not leave. I would stay until you were forced out of the SBC because, so imagine the conservative resurgence, back 30 plus years ago, or a little over 30 years ago, you had Southern Baptists get together. They said the churches were conservative, but the institutions had gone liberal. So, well, how do we get this back? Well, you have to elect a conservative SBC president who then chooses committees that then chooses trustees that are conservative, and they hire and fire at those institutions based on the confession that we affirm. And so that's what they did. Now, imagine if they had just left and started something else, right? And that was 30 years ago. Do you think that we would still today be fighting the same battles we're fighting right now, 30 years later, if they had went and started something new? Absolutely, and we'd be much smaller,
Hmm.
right? You wouldn't have Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, you wouldn't have Southwestern, you wouldn't have any of our seminaries. I mean, it to me, it makes no logical sense. If you leave, you're going to give those institutions to people who are going to teach against you. And I mean, back before the conservative resurgence, you had at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, you had professors preaching in chapel pro-choice abortion sermons. I mean, that's how liberal it got. We are nowhere near that.
Right.
We're nowhere close to that. And so I think of just historically, you're going to always battle theological liberalism. I mean, you always have to put your dukes up and fight. I mean, we saw it with wokeism, in the past decade. Look at how many churches and ministries wokeism ripped through.
Yeah.
And who saw that coming? I mean, who saw that coming? Not just that, not just critical theory, critical race theory, now critical queer theory. Who saw that coming? Who saw a bunch of stalwart inerrantists being duped by gay Christianity? I mean, who saw that coming? Like who could prepare for that? Oh, we're going to start something new. You can't see what's coming around the corner. Whatever you start that's new, you're going to have guys in your group that you think are stalwart who are going to be duped by things. And so you always have to constantly contend for the faith and seek to be biblical. So my issue is, my concern is that if you go and start something new, we're also in negative world now. When the Southern Baptist Convention was built, it was positive world, meaning it basically didn't cost you hardly anything to be a Christian in America when the conservative resurgence happened and it was being built, right? The SBC cooperative program or institutions were being built. People were positive toward Christianity. We're getting to a point in American history where that is no longer the case, to where it can cost you to be a Christian. And if folks are members of your church, I mean, it could cost them vocationally and politically and just all kinds of ways. It costs them money. And so it means in the future that Christians are probably going to have less money, which even though they're going to be able to give 10% of, $30,000 is a lot less than 10% of $300,000. And so our churches are going to be smaller financially in the future, probably. And so building something today based on, 5% or 10% of Southern Baptist churches, they're giving, well, their tithing is going to be smaller because their incomes are going to be smaller, because in negative world Christians, the first thing, if you look at often how the devil works just in church history, the first thing that's going to cost Christians is their money. They're going to take away your ability to make a living. And that's why you have all these lawsuits going for Christian business owners. They're trying to take away their ability to earn a living. And that's the first thing. And so that's what we're going to see with our institutions. And so if you go and try to build something else, it's going to be much smaller and it's going to take longer to build. I mean, the Lord can do anything. The Lord can work miracles. I don't want you to go against your conscience, but I just think that staying and fighting until Southern Baptists force you to leave, I think that is the answer. That's what I plan to do. I'm going to continue contending. I'm going to continue persuading and encouraging. I think we've got a big opportunity here to move people to the right. I don't understand why Southern Baptists, we've got to tell the world to go kick rocks, to not care what the world thinks and to say, this is what the Bible says. And if you'll leave your life of sin and come follow Jesus, he'll save you eternally. But you hate us because you hate his ethic. And instead of trying to soften that ethic or to tiptoe around it and dance on eggshells, and we don't need to do that. We need to unashamedly say, thus saith the Lord. And instead, we're like apologetic in how we present the ethics of Jesus. And I mean, it's nuts. We've lost our prophetic voice, and we need to get that back.
Yeah. Renaissance Men's in the chat. He said, "World kick rocks, Christians." Yep. Will, you'll have to have Jared on your show sometime. I think you guys would be, you guys would make for a great conversation. But yeah, so Jared, explain to maybe some of our non-SBC brothers who might listen to this podcast. You mentioned how the SBC is not going to prevent churches from teaching what they've always taught. So to those who are not in the SBC, does the SBC have authority over the local church? Maybe just briefly explain that for those who are not familiar with how it works.
The only authority that the Southern Baptist Convention has over any SBC church is to say, we will not accept your money, which means if they don't accept our money, then we are not able to seat messengers and vote at the convention. So we're not part of the Southern Baptist Convention. It's the only thing they can do. They can make, I mean, they can't do anything to your church except accept your money or reject it. That's the only thing that the Southern Baptist Convention can do. And so, if the SBC came to our church and told us to do something, we'd tell them to go kick rocks, right? Like, you have no authority here. We own our property. You don't own it. So that's the thing. Like, we're talking about, if you give $1 to the Southern Baptist Convention, you can send 2 messengers to vote at the convention from your church.
Right.
And I have no idea why conservatives won't do that. Now, I believe in continuing to support Southern Baptist entities, because whenever I think our entities are good. Now, I think we need to remove leadership at some of our entities and change it. But whenever we get new leadership in there, I don't want to hand them a weak entity. And so if you're giving $1, your church says, well, we're going to give $1 to the SBC. What you're probably going to do is whatever money you were giving to the SBC, you're going to give to another missions organization. And then when the SBC gets more conservative enough for you to give to them, you're going to have to go to your church and say, look, we got to pull money from this and give back to the SBC. And a lot of people are going to balk at that. Most of the time, if churches stop giving to the SBC, they never return to giving to the SBC, because there's so many good missions causes out there. And then you build relationships. And so, the Southern Baptist Convention, you still have thousands of missionaries worldwide. We're actually trying to get the gospel to the ends of the earth. I mean, how many missions orgs are joined together for that purpose? We're literally, the IMB's got a plan right now to try to get the gospel to all the unreached people groups in the next 20 years. I mean, what other missions org has that goal, or even has the money or resources behind them to do that, to be able to train and send? I mean, not just that, but our seminaries train over 60% of all evangelical seminary trained pastors, not just SBC, but all. Imagine leaving that behind and giving it to someone who's going to be more liberal than you. And our seminaries are still very conservative. I mean, there are departments and there are people, but our seminaries as a whole are still very conservative. And I've got opinions on which ones are the most conservative and which ones are the least. But I think we're way far away from leaving the SBC. And if you start something within 10 years, you leave the SBC and you try to start something new, within 10 years, you're going to be fighting the same issues.
Right. Not sure what's happening with my camera there, folks, but hopefully you all can continue watching and listening uninterrupted. I tend to agree with you, Jared. It's tempting to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because right now there are some who are truly trying to we're truly trying to point out the cancer in the body, but some of us are pretending that it's terminal and that we're already we're already in a coma from this disease that we have. In reality, it's like, no, it's in the beginning stages, and we still have we shouldn't pretend that it's not there. I think that's the other ditch, is pretending that everything's completely fine. It's not fine. We have a lot of work to do, but at the same time, there are still so many good things happening in the SBC with some of our ministry heads. And to your point, I think it's going to be a lot heavier lift to try to build something new. Especially like you said, you're probably only going to get, if you're well organized, 5% of the SBC churches, and 10% of 5% of the SBC is what you're going to be working out in terms of your funding. And yeah, to your point, negative world, it's only going to get harder and harder. So do we really have any ability to build anything close to that? I know you've talked before in some of your content about Harvard, and how Harvard started as a righteous institution. And as it started to drift liberal, many split off from that and formed Princeton. And well, look at Princeton. Is Princeton any better than Harvard these days? No. So at the end of the day, we have to, at some point, stick our feet in the sand and fight for reform. In fact, I was hearing some advice recently: build what you need, reform what you can, and destroy what you must. And I think the SBC currently is in the category of reform what you can. if we're gonna talk about institutions or in the realm of politics, I wouldn't sell someone, yeah, you should do your best to stay in California. I'm sure if you just work real hard, you can reform the state of California. That's going to be a multi-generational project, and that's going to take some real miracles to see the state of California flip completely around. But if someone said the same thing in the state of Arizona, I'd say, well, Arizona's a swing state. Reform what you can. And right now, the SBC is still the largest conservative denomination. We still disassociated a church at the SBC who was affirming female pastors. Now we can talk about that because I think there's an angle to that may be nefarious, but either way, I think that still speaks to the fact that the SBC is still willing to stand on solid ground when there's enough backbone and enough support and enough education surrounding the issue. Now, to that point, though, I was going to ask you. So that was First Baptist Alexandria that got disassociated from the SBC at the convention. I was kind of hearing behind the scenes that maybe there was some funny business with when that vote was brought up. Specifically, it was brought up the day before the law amendment was passed, and some of the criticisms that I heard surrounding that was that leadership wanted this vote to take place before the law amendment to essentially say, see, look, we can do this without the law amendment. Do you believe any of those rumors?
Absolutely. So the way that, there's nothing done by accident in the schedule of the Southern Baptist Convention. Nothing. It's all done in order to get a particular outcome that the SBC president wants to get. That's just how it is. You can see how they rearrange things when they do votes. If they want to push something through, you put it right before lunch because people are hungry and people are exhausted, and they're more likely to make an uninformed vote, a quick vote, a hasty vote, than they are right after lunch. And if you want them to discuss something, you want a lot of discussion, you put it right after lunch. That's how it's done. If you want a motion to not be considered, you put it in the last possible time that you can present motions. It's not by accident that these things are done. So, and yeah, I'm sure I thought leading up to the convention that they were not going to bring that church forward to vote them out, is what I had understood.
My understanding as well.
And then all of a sudden, here it is, and they bring it up, which is I don't know. I don't know why. Look, I want to assume the best, but I'm not saying it's nefarious. I'm saying that they have a particular agenda they want to get across, and so they organize everything to get their agenda done.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's nefarious. Right. I'm saying I wouldn't do that. If I was SBC president, I would not do that. We would organize it to get not what I want done, but to where Southern Baptists can get what they want done. And that's just whoever's in the room, man. That's the thing. Like, I would organize it around the confession. Like, I think the confession represents the fullness of the SBC. If you want to know what Southern Baptists believe, you go to our confession. And so I just, but yeah, they definitely do that. Bart Barber and the committees that he organizes, whoever's pulling the strings, and I don't know who that is. There's somebody behind the scenes, similar to people came and asked me. People asked each of the candidates that ran, and you have to ask which one of those candidates was the Bart Barber candidate. Whoever asked Bart Barber to run, which candidate, who'd they ask to run this time? And I assume it was Keybone. And I assume that Bruce Frank was J.D. Greer. And I may be wrong on that. I'm not saying anything nefarious, or I'm just saying, like, who were the people that approached these men? And I know Clint is Louisville, and then David Allen. I think David Allen was persuaded to run by not CBN, but guys who are friendly with CBN. And Allen was an excellent candidate. I wish Allen had won. I wish I had won, but then I wish Allen had won.
Right.
But Clint was my third choice, and so I wish Clint well. I'm praying for him and
Yeah.
praying that he makes wise decisions. And he's got an opportunity to. I think this needs to be definitive, where the SBC takes a step to the right. I
Yeah.
think he needs to appoint committees that are super conservative, not try to be a centrist, not try to be a middle way person, because you've had 6 years of to the left. J.D.
Right.
Greer was to the left, and then Ed Litton was J.D. Greer 2.0, and then Bart Barber. All three of those guys are against the law amendment,
Right.
and so they're to the left of Clint. Right?
Right.
They're still conservative, depending on who you ask. Right?
Right.
Uh, but they're to the left, and they have had so many committee appointments because it's roughly 30 executive committee members resigned whenever the SBC voted for them to waive attorney-client privilege. So they got to appoint at least 30 executive committee members, and we assume that those are not committee members that are to the right. Now, some of them may be, but the largest majority of them had to be in the likeness of those SBC presidents.
Right.
And it's no mistake that the executive committee comes out and says we're against the law amendment. Well, really? Well, 30 of you were chosen by somebody who's against the law amendment, right? Like it's no accident. And
Right.
so I hope that Clint will intentionally say, let's find the most complementarian guys and guys like me, and put guys like me on these committees who are far right. It's funny, I'm far right whenever I just believe what Southern Baptists have always believed since the conservative resurgence.
Right. And that was a piece that I wrote a while back about your candidacy. Is I was also kind of making the argument that I mean, most institutions in America, all across culture, whether that be in the realm of politics, that would be in the realm of pop culture, education, whatever the case may be, most major institutions are left leaning. And so my argument was we need a right leaning institution that is strongly to the right. And of course you're naturally going to be labeled far right and dangerous by media, but we need a bulwark against all the other institutions, because if we have hundreds of institutions that are all to the left and maybe a handful on the right, I mean, it's inevitable that our culture continues to slide left. And so I hope that Clint hears your plea, and I hope that he does appoint individuals that are very conservative theologically and have steel spines, because in a way Clint is kind of a canary in the coal mine that the SBC is we're not so far gone, because Clint was kind of the centrist candidate. To your point, he was your third choice after you and David Allen, and so to some degree we see that Clint does have an opportunity, depending upon what way he goes, to really signal the direction for Southern Baptists going forward. And I hope that he feels both the pressure from grassroots individuals within the SBC, as well as just his own conscience to govern accordingly with what little power the SBC does give the president, because that can really shape our near future. I mean, are you hopeful that that may happen?
I'm hopeful that his appointments will be more to the right than Barber, Greer, Litton. And I think Barber was a little bit to the right of Greer and Litton, but still not enough. Not enough. We need someone who, again, the far right. We need someone who is unashamedly to the right. Like it's amazing me what J.D. Greer, the stuff that he has said about fundamentalist, and referring to. I mean, he even referred to members of his church as part of the synagogue of Satan because of their right-leaning views. And if you said that stuff about liberals, people would lose their minds. But
Right.
you can always go after those to your right, and that's how it is in the world. And for some reason, folks think it's okay in the church too. Like If you just watch our SBC institutions, look at who they'll associate with, right? They'll associate with people to their left. They'll invite people to their left to even come preach in chapel at seminary. They never do that for somebody to their right. Never. And
Right.
that's just how it is. It's you constantly criticize the right, and no wonder your institution is always going left. It's always drifting left. If you're not intentional about moving to the right and staying to the right, you're always drifting left. That goes for churches. That goes for institutions. I mean, and so we've got to get away from that. And I think that the world's going to get so bad that our institutions are going to come around. I just hope it's not too late.
Yeah, I'm praying that you're right on that, and that same rule applies to individuals. I would say, for myself, I realized partway through, starting this podcast and beginning to have these difficult conversations that there is a tendency for everyone to coddle left and punch right, and so I actually made a mental decision to do the opposite. And if you watch my former episodes, you'll actually probably see a change in me over the course of the couple of years that I've been doing this podcast. Aside from the fact that I hope the audio and video quality's gone up, I think you'll see that where I am on the sort of a political and theological timeline, you'll see me shift to the right. And the blessing of that is when I've made a point to assume the best of those to my right, almost every time I've been persuaded by their arguments. And it's just funny how if you listen to someone and you truly actually try to understand and engage in good faith, oftentimes those individuals are the ones with the facts, and you realize that you were rejecting that because you were tone policing those to your right. And that's a major thing in churches. And I know you've talked about that a lot before, and unfortunately it's something that I really hope that we see die out in the coming years within the church. I think that we need more individuals that are just willing to stand up and say what needs to be said. So that being said, Jared, I mean, what do you think is kind of the future for those of us who are conservative in the SBC? How do we hold our institutions and not lose any more ground?
Well, in the next 10 years, you're going to have at least 2, probably 3 appointments to presidents in our entities. Actually 4. So I don't think Dr. Moeller's going to continue for another decade. I don't think Danny Akin's going to continue for another decade. Southwestern's going to have a president within a decade. And I don't think Ezel will continue another decade. Now, he may reach the high end of that between 5-7 years, but I don't think he's going to continue another decade. So those appointments are going to be huge. And so we need to make sure and do our best to get conservative SBC presidents so that the trustees who appoint and choose those presidents of those entities are to the right, are to the right. And I think to the right of Moeller. I think whoever follows Moeller needs to be to his right. I think whoever, definitely Danny Akin, whoever it follows him needs to be to his right. Now, here's the thing with Danny Akin. Danny Akin may be as conservative as he's ever been, but he is more tolerable towards liberalism than he's ever been, right? Since he's been an entity head. And that's the issue. We need someone who is not only to the right, but they're also convictional about what they will permit. I mean, we need a conservative who will not hire Karen Swallow Pryor to be a professor.
Right.
Are you kidding me? Right? Like, if she's Southern Baptist, I can fly. And so, stuff like that drives me nuts. When men will get up and act like they're as conservative as they've ever been, when it's obvious, we see the videos, we see who you're hiring at your institution. Don't tell me you're conservative if you're willing to tolerate theological liberalism.
Right.
I mean, she's out affirming gay Christianity and signing the Nashville Statement. Both. I mean, what? It's liberalism. There's no other way around it. Theological liberalism, that is the play. That's what theological liberals did. They signed the Baptist Faith and Message too, whenever they were teaching contrary to it. And so the way that we take it back is by showing up at the convention. That is literally the SBC, man. All you have to do is come to the convention and vote. That's it. You want the SBC to be conservative? That's literally all you have to do. Take 2 days out of your year, save the money, come to the convention and vote. Like people are like, what do we do? What do we do? 2 days, vote. That's literally it. That's how the SBC is set up. You do that for 10 years, you can have the most right-wing hillbilly be president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary.
Yeah.
I'm not joking. I mean, that's exactly like you can do it, but nobody will do it. Nobody we can't afford to drive, sleep in your car. Like, call up churches, say, hey, can we sleep in your gym?
Right.
Southern Baptist churches that are local there. Like, you can do it. You can do it. Nobody is poor enough. Like most of these people who are saying they don't have the money, right? We don't have the money. And you look at their lives, and are they not going on vacation? Are they not you can do it if you want to do it. If you think it's important enough to do it, you can do it. And so that's what I want to encourage you to do. Come and vote. Sleep in your car if you got to. I guarantee you a lot of those churches would open up their gyms and let you sleep in them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of the issue is when it comes to everyday people in the pews, I think they don't always connect the dots of how the SBC affects their daily life. I think oftentimes they think about how their congressman affects their daily life. And I'm talking because I mostly do commentary in the realm of politics. And so I see how it's so easy to think of that as the low hanging fruit. But in reality, your congressman doesn't even hardly affect your life that much over in DC compared to your sheriff or your mayor. And it's kind of the same thing with your local church affects your daily life a lot more than your U.S. representative to Congress. And so at the end of the day, I think that we need to do a better job. Those of us who are aware of connecting those dots for the average person, because the reality is we don't have to win. We don't have to win tomorrow. We have to win the institutions that win tomorrow. The SBC is one of the biggest, most important institutions in America that we currently still have a large foothold in. We being theologically conservative individuals, who want to see the culture restored to righteousness. I mean, this is sort of ground zero for the fight if we want to actually win something that can multiply our impact tenfold over. It's going to be the SBC. And so hopefully we can do a good job of connecting with that. That's why I think the Center for Baptist Leadership has been so important. And to your point earlier, the Center for Baptist Leadership, they were helping to connect people to housing. They were trying, I think they had some grant money available even. I don't know for sure on that, so don't quote me on it, but they definitely were helping individuals make connections with other like-minded SBC members that were coming to vote. And so it's not that hard. It's just, honestly, I would say the biggest hurdle is just getting the time off. If you're, if your work is a real stickler about it, but plan in advance. They let us know long in advance where the convention is going to be. So there's no real excuse. So hopefully we can see a real resurgence. Hopefully we laid the foundation this year for a big push in the next couple annual meetings. I wanted to quickly have you address another thing that has been kind of circulating that I think has been taken out of context a lot online, Jared, and that's the Nicene Creed. So did the Southern Baptist Convention take the Nicene Creed and rip it up in front of all the sea and say that we no longer affirm the Nicene Creed? What went down there with the Nicene Creed?
Yeah, the Nicene Creed, I believe it was referred to committee, and they're going to examine it. And actually, another motion was given to committee to consider the Athanasian Creed, the Apostles' Creed, and there was one more in addition to the Nicene. And so it's in committee, and they'll bring a recommendation next year. But I don't have an issue with the Nicene Creed. I mean, I do think the emphasis on baptism for the remission of sins is in the Lutheran sense in that text. But since it's pulled from Scripture, I mean, I agree obviously with the Bible. And so What I would rather see is a summary of all those. Like, and I think Chalcedon needs to be on there as well.
Mm.
So the Chalcedonian Creed is essentially the hypostatic union, God the Son incarnate, united to a divine nature and a human nature. So there is union of the two natures in God the Son without mixture. There's distinction of the two natures in God the Son without separation. So a phrase like that needs to be in the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. But there are people who were against adding it to the confession, but that doesn't mean that you're against the content of it. And it does seem weird to just base, like, because our statement on the Trinity is not deficient in the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. So why are we adding the Nicene Creed to the end? I think they want to emphasize the logical order of subsistence. The Father begets the Son, and the Holy Spirit spirates from the Father and the Son. That these distinctions among the Trinity are the only things that distinguish the Trinitarian persons. And the reason why is they're trying to go against the eternal functional subordination of the Son that men like Wayne Grudem and Bruce Ware have advocated for. And so they think that they can get after those men and over this issue. And I think it's a witch hunt, in my opinion. I affirm classical Trinitarianism. So the logical order of subsistence. I even affirm divine simplicity, the identity thesis, where God is his properties and his properties are one another, which even Berkhoff didn't affirm that. But anyway, I have no issues with the Nicene Creed or Chalcedon or Athanasian Creed or the Apostles' Creed or any of that. But whenever they start trying to go after these men, whenever they are merely saying, all right, now where some of his earlier writings where he was trying to argue that the Son has a property the Father does not, that can be construed as these are three gods, right? Because when you put the will in the person rather than in the nature, so there's three wills among the Trinity rather than one will that the three persons simultaneously act through. That can be dangerous, right? That can be heretical whenever you start, because I don't know how you avoid three gods whenever you put the wills in the persons. And so Ware shored that up over a decade ago, and got his language better, got his language more right, and so did Wayne Grudem. Yeah. And but let me just explain what classical Trinitarianism is, right? So the Father is unbegotten, and he is logically prior to the Son and the Holy Spirit. I mean, that's classical Trinitarianism. What does logically prior imply, if not functional subordination? What do the names Father and Son imply, if not functional subordination? Now, what the classical Trinitarianism implies, these men have said it's actual. And so they've taken it a step further, which I don't agree with doing that, but it's not heresy.
Right.
It's error. It's error. And I do believe it's error, but they're not heretics.
Right.
And so but folks want to say, well, see, you can't affirm Nicene Creed, so you're a heretic. But I believe those men would tell you they affirm the Nicene Creed. Right. And so, I mean, so it's much ado about nothing, where these guys, I think it's a witch. The reason why I said it's a witch hunt is because who were the stalwarts in the Southern Baptist Convention for complementarianism? Bruce Ware, Wayne Grudem, Owen Strachan, and all three of those guys affirmed EFSS, eternal functional subordination of the Son. And so those guys were the stalwarts on those issues. And then because the reason why they were saying that is because if the Son is equal with the Father, but yet he functionally submits to the Father, then submission does not mean that a woman is necessarily inferior to her husband, even though she submits to him. And so they were using the Trinity to argue this about complementarianism, which I that's wrong. I don't do that, right? But again, it's not heresy; it is error. And but long story short, I think folks were largely going after them over complementarianism, and the doctrine of the Trinity was the easy way to say you're a heretic.
Yeah.
Right. Don't listen to anything these guys say because they're wrong on the doctrine of the Trinity. And so that's my opinion. No, we did not reject the Nicene Creed. It's in committee, and we'll get a recommendation in Dallas.
Awesome. Well, thank you for clearing up the rumors, because that's definitely one that I saw floating around, and it's just driving me wild. But yeah, well, thank you, Jared. Really appreciate you coming on and giving us a bit of a pep talk and letting me pick your brain for a while. Really appreciate that. Where can people go to keep up with you and everything that you have going on?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Jared H. Moore. That's probably the best place to interact with me. If you haven't seen my book yet, I want to encourage you to pick it up. It's called The Lust of the Flesh. You can get it on Amazon for Kindle, and you can get it at freegracepress.com for paperback. And let me know if you have any questions about any of these issues, or if you want to push back on any of this Trinitarian language or anything I said. I'm happy to talk and chat. But yeah, stay in the SBC. The Southern Baptist Convention is worth staying in and defending, and just really loving one another. That's really what it boils down to. Do you love Southern Baptist? If you do, you'll stay in the convention.
Amen. Well, thank you, listeners. We really appreciate you tuning in. Feel free to check out our Substack, forgeandanvil.substack.com, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.